Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I am reviewing our very first buddy read that we hosted on my Discord, which is Kristoff's Empire of the Vampire. So this is a book that wasn't really on my radar until close to its publication date because I had heard so many people wanting to read it and then had seen some blurbs from some of my favorite authors. And I had never read anything by Kristoff before. And when this started getting all kinds of buzz, then I thought, okay, well, I could probably pre-order this. And to be honest, my bookstore had a deal on when you pre-ordered it. You got bonus points. So that's probably, for being candid, that is probably the reason why I pre-ordered it in the first place. But then once I decided I was going to put it on my October TBR, a bunch of people who follow the channel regularly had all said that they also wanted to read this book. And so we got together, I think there was a group of like 5 or 6 of us, and we read it together on Discord. And it was really, really fun. So I had a great experience reading this. It was really fun. We broke it up by books because this novel is broken up into 6 individual books inside. And so we discussed each book as we kind of went along, trying to stay on track or like going the same pace. And it was a great time. I had a lot of fun. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a formal review for this, but then I thought of what a good experience it was to read it with everybody, and I wanted to give my thoughts so that everyone else who read along would be able to watch the review and we could all kind of discuss and gather our thoughts in this one place. So I will format this very much like my regular spoiler-free reviews. I'm just going to give a very brief overview, like what you would see on the flap for the book, and then talk about the different elements and how I felt about it. So I guess I will start by saying that I gave this book 4 stars. For the majority of the reading experience, I thought it was going to be a 3 or maybe 3.5 star book for me, but never having read a book by Kristoff before, I didn't realize that he loves to finish his books with a bang. I mentioned there were 6 books, so books 5 and 6 in this were just impossible to stop reading. I had kind of slowed my pace a little bit and read through this pretty slowly so that I could keep on track with everybody and we could all discuss. But once I got to books 5 and 6, I just could not. I was like, nope, I have to read this the rest of the way through. That is it. There is nothing else that can be done. And it definitely elevated the entire book for me. I really, really enjoyed the ending. So overall, this was a 4-star read for me. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and the things that I liked and disliked, because I have had some people write on my October TBR that they weren't sure if they wanted to pick it up. And so hopefully this will be helpful in a spoiler-free capacity in helping you to figure out whether or not you want to put it on your own TBR. Before I start, I just want to comment on the book itself. This is a beautiful book. I do prefer the UK cover. I find that the scantily clad man gives it kind of a romance book vibe. Now, there is a reason for this person to be shirtless. It does fit with the aesthetic and the world building of the book, but it's still like the cover makes me smile a little bit. But I do like the animals that are in blood on the cover there. That's really nice. And I have the Chapters Indigo special edition, which has these beautiful illustrations. They are color illustrations on the flaps. And they are so, so pretty. I'm not going to show the 2 on the back because for people who are particularly sensitive to spoilers, they could be considered spoilers. But these are just pictures of 2 of the characters who are in the book. So I don't think there's anything spoilery about the initial pictures. And then within the book itself, there are also a bunch of black and white illustrations that are beautiful. And again, I'm just going to show one that is a character profile because I don't want to give away anything spoilery in terms of scenes. And there's also a really lovely map that is in here. And not having a front-facing camera, not being able to see, I'm always like, I wonder if this is in frame or am I just showing people nothing? So we'll see when I play it back. But there's also a really beautiful map on the inside. So just in terms of production quality, this is a really beautiful book. And for me, at least, that always elevates the reading experience. If you have not heard anything about Empire of the Vampire yet, the basic setup is that we are living in a world where for the past 27 years, there has been no sun rising. So Earth has kind of been cast in perpetual darkness over the past 3 decades. And in this darkness, vampires have risen into power. And the narrator of this story, our main character, the protagonist, his name is Gabriel de Lyon, and he is telling the story of his life. So he has, and this is, you find this out from the very first pages, he has been captured by vampires and is being forced by them to go back and tell his story as the last remaining member of the Silver Saints. So the Silver Saints were a holy brotherhood that came together, trained together to try to be the light, to push back against the darkness. It was their goal to eliminate the vampires and to bring back the rising of the sun. And at the beginning of this book, we find that Gabriel, the very last of this order, has been trapped and he is being forced into, I guess, making a confession about his entire life. And so it is through this detailing of his life that we are delivered the story. So a pretty basic premise for a story. And because this is the way that it's told, we kind of end up with 3 timelines. So we end up with the timeline where Gabriel is telling the story in the present time. So he is with one vampire primarily who is recording. He's known as the historian, and he is recording this history. And then we have 2 alternate timelines. So we have Gabriel's story of his coming of age, where he was recruited and trained in what is essentially, it's an academy, but basically a huge church or a huge monastery called Saint Michon, and he is trained there to be one of the Silver Saints. And then we have the secondary timeline, which is, I believe, is it 16 years in the future from when the first one starts off? But it has been, I think it's been about 15 or 16 years since the very beginning of the first timeline. And we find Gabriel, who is now partaking in a quest for a holy relic. So we kind of have 2 different casts of characters, and Gabriel is the thread that weaves the 2 together. So in timeline 1, we have him and his friends and mentors and enemies as he goes through this magical school. And then in the second timeline, we have him and the different players who kind of enter the game as he is forced somewhat reluctantly on this quest for a holy relic. So those are the 2 timelines that we have. And I definitely preferred the coming of age magic school timeline, which if you have watched this channel, you are probably not surprised by that. Those are settings that I enjoy in fantasy. That's the kind of stuff that I like to read about. But based on the very small sample size that we had in the Discord read-along, I think this was everybody's favorite part. I think those parts, especially at the beginning of the book, are more compelling because you are finding out more about the world building, about the magic, about the setup. So you're just getting a lot more, at least what I think is very interesting information in that first timeline. But by the time we get to the end of the book, both of these stories have kind of escalated and are reaching their very exciting climax. So I do think that they even out by the end of the story. But for me, for most of the time, I was wanting to be in Saint Michon. I was wanting to watch Gabriel train and become one of these Silver Saints. So that is the basic premise of the book. What I think will determine whether or not Empire of the Vampire is for you is what kind of writing style you like. This was my very first experience with Kristoff, and if you have not read his books before, I say go in expecting something that is very over the top, very angsty, very edgy. If that is the kind of writing style that you like, or if it's the kind of writing style that you like to break up your regular types of reading, which is what this was for me, then you will probably like this book. There is a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of edginess. So Gabriel himself is a very typical, like, I am a dark and brooding protagonist. I have been through trauma. I am, you cannot imagine the horrors that have befallen my life. I am now so cynical. And so this is the Gabriel that we are introduced to in the beginning of the story as he's going back to tell his history. And there's a lot of like over the top swearing. There's a lot of like portmanteaus that are made into like very creative curse words. So if that's the kind of humor that you enjoy in your stories, I think Jay Kristoff does it well. I think that he is very self-aware, or at least that is how it seems when you are reading the book. He is not intending for this to be anything but what it is, which is a completely over the top, bombastic vampire tale. So I think if you like that, if you like the sarcastic, edgy, brooding kind of hero, if you like those quippy one-liners and frequent insults, then I think that he does it well. There are also some really great descriptions. I think that he does a fantastic job of making his setting really vivid. His prose really reflects that, so he is able to transport you into the story. Now, the illustrations definitely help because they provide you with some foundation about what this world and what these characters look like. But I think that Jay Kristoff's writing also really helps. And because it has that kind of angsty, over-the-top flair, I think that it also kind of pulls you in emotionally. I think the writing style, and someone in my Discord did not agree with me for this comparison, but to me, Jay Kristoff feels like someone who could be paired with Sarah J. Maas's style of writing. So to me, that very highly emotional, sometimes teetering on the melodramatic, with these kind of grand gestures, that makes a good transition from YA reading into adult fantasy reading. And can appeal, has that kind of cross-market appeal. And it seems like Jay Kristoff is very popular, and I imagine that is why. I think that there is, if you want to talk about it in publishing terms, that cross-market appeal. This will appeal to people who really love YA fantasy, even though it is unconditionally an adult fantasy. There is a lot of sexual content, there is a lot of really mature content, there is a lot of violence. This is hands down an adult fantasy novel, but I think that because of the style of the prose, because of those really high emotional stakes that are present throughout the book, I think if you enjoy YA fantasy, then you would probably like this as well. And if you really hate YA fantasy, I don't know if you'll enjoy this book. You still might, because the content is there. Jay Kristoff does not shy away from having high stakes, from brutally breaking your heart, from doing all those things that sometimes it feels like YA fantasy kind of backs away from, but it includes a lot of that kind of relationship drama and emotional stress that you get from the young adult categorization. So take that for what you will. I think if you know your own reading taste, you can probably judge based on that whether or not you would like this book. The characters themselves, I have to say, it took some time for Gabriel to grow on me, because I am not always a fan of that overly sarcastic, over-the-top, vulgar character. I really like it when it's done well and in short bursts, but when it's kind of all the time I'm being inundated by all of these made-up swear words, then sometimes I'm like, I get it. You're angsty. Bad things have happened. It's okay. We can move on. But Gabriel did grow on me as the story closed, and I did find myself really emotionally invested in his history and the things that had happened to him by the time the novel ended. I did feel very attached to him as a character. There are a lot of secondary characters that I really enjoyed. In the magical school setting, so like stream 1 of the story, you do get some common tropes that I know Alan in particular, the Library of Alexandria, really hates. So you do get the kind of sociopathic bully character. There is a lot of antagonism at the school, which for me, I thought was a little bit of a missed opportunity, because I would have really I always prefer to see a brotherhood. And because this is a literal holy brotherhood, I was hoping that from the beginning we would get some of those really strong bonds being forged. Now, people are given the opportunity to grow and change over the course of this book, which is really satisfying. It happens a little bit too quickly for my personal taste, but I think some of that is the function of the dual timeline and having to to put so much story into, even though it's a chunky book, it's still a lot of ground to cover in this many pages. So some of the character development happens a little rapidly, but ultimately people do or are capable of change. So I thought that was really that was a really high point of the novel. And the side characters are very interesting. There are a couple of side characters who I won't mention because I want, like I said, to stay as spoiler-free as possible. But there are a couple of side characters who definitely captured my heart, and I'm very invested in their stories and was very invested in their stories throughout the entirety of the book. In terms of the characters, like talking about the characters kind of blends into talking about the world building, because most of Gabriel's story takes place at this monastery where he is training to become one of the Silver Saints, which are essentially holy paladins. So they are a group of elite warriors who are trained to fight against the vampires, and their main source of power, so they have kind of increased physical strength and increased capabilities compared to the rest of the human population, but they're also inked with Aegis. So they have all these tattoos that are lined with silver that cover their whole bodies. And if you look at the artwork on the inside, you can see that the main character, Gabriel, he has all of these ink markings. And so this is the source of some of their holy power. So these markings are supposed to be representations of the saints or representation of the martyrs or of their particular faith in this world's God, who is called the Redeemer. So these tattoos are kind of markings of their faith, and depending on the strength of your faith, you can channel that through these markings and use that also as kind of a shield against the darkness. So that happens to varying degrees and can change over time, but that is part of the underlying magic system that is here. So every time that you accomplish something or you hit a different milestone at this magical school setting, then you are inked with more of these markings, and I guess you gain more renown as one of the Silver Saints. So that was a really interesting layer of the world building. In terms of the vampires, this feels like a combination of a couple of really classic types of vampires. So you get a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses as in Bram Stoker's Dracula. The vampires themselves feel very Anne Rice to me. Like there's that underlying hint of sensuality or sexuality that crosses over into this book. And Jay Kristoff is definitely does not shy away from like the taboo subjects. Like there's some pretty disturbing content. It's never the main focus, but it definitely crops up sometimes. You're like, whoa, that is a choice that you made in this book. So he definitely doesn't shy away from the things that are difficult and disturbing in terms of vampires and being turned. So these are definitely vampires that fall on the very scary side of the spectrum. And there's a lot of interesting world building regarding the vampires as well. I don't want to get into too many details because I think that this is the most fun part of the book, is discovering these layers of world building. But I will just say that there are various vampire clans, and depending on the clan, this will influence their capabilities. So I think that is probably one of the most interesting things to discover over the course of reading the novel. So I will allow you to do that yourself if you decide to pick it up. But I thought that the world building it's light in terms of originality. The Redeemer, which is the kind of God figure, it is modeled after Christianity. There are a lot of parallels, but Jay Kristoff does bring his own spin on things. His vampires are kind of an amalgamation of different pieces of vampire lore. So he combines a lot of really classic tropes in terms of RPGs and vampire lore, etc. But he definitely puts his own spin on it, and it makes for a very interesting story, I think. It really feels vibrant. It feels like it has come to life, even if it is not singing in originality. I think that because of the way that he frames it, it ends up landing really well. I had a great time, like I said, learning about Gabriel, entering into this world and discovering all there was to discover about it. I really, really enjoyed that part of the book, which makes sense because The Name of the Wind is one of my favorite books, and it has that same story setup. So you get a little bit of that kind of Name of the Wind flavor mixed with a little bit of that kind of like dark, sensual Anne Rice vampire story, which makes for an interesting tale for sure. But overall, like I said, I did end up enjoying this. I thought at the beginning that it was going to be a little bit over the top for me, and that it was going to tend a little bit into melodrama, and it was not really going to be to my taste. But as the story went on, I did enjoy it more and more. And like I said, the ending was just explosive. The last 2 parts of this book had me flipping the pages, and I was desperate to find out what happened. And I do feel really invested in what comes next. I will absolutely read the next book, and I will absolutely read it as soon as it comes out. Hopefully, I will still be going on booktube. I'll still be chugging along, and I'll still have the friends that I have now, and we can still read the second book together. This is a very long-term plan to make, but those are my hopes for the future. And I hope that it does come out next year. I guess I'm being very presumptuous, assuming that he's going to write another giant book like this in a year. But that seems to be the trend, at least for most authors. So I'm hopeful that will happen. And if not, I liked it enough that I will wait a couple of years for the next one to come out. But that's it. I wanted to keep this kind of short and sweet, just to be an indicator about whether or not you think you will like this story, whether or not the things that I mentioned are to your taste, if they're things that you think that you will enjoy or not enjoy. If you have read Empire of the Vampire, then I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I think everybody who read it on my Discord really enjoyed it. Some loved it more than others. I think if I had to judge, and the scale that I was using to rate this book for myself as I was going through was on a scale from Alan from the Library of Alexandria, who sent me a text message saying, "I'm so disappointed. Why would you read this?" to one of my friends in Discord who I'm pretty sure has a shrine to J. Kristoff in his home now, and he can identify himself in the comments if he would like to. But between those 2 extremes, I feel like I sit I don't know, maybe around 80%. I liked it. I really enjoyed the ending. I am looking forward to reading the next book, and I'm really happy that I read it. It is very readable. Like I said, I took my time with it a little bit more, but you could definitely read this in a few sittings. It's the style, the prose, it's very engaging. You are not heavily bogged down. The world building is organic. There's not a lot of info dumping. So I think that there is a lot to admire, provided that you can handle the kind of edgy, angsty tone. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you are going to pick it up, and I will see you with another video soon. Bye.